1997. How many remember 1997? Princess Diana, Seinfeld, Spice Girls. There was this big East Coast, West Coast rap battle with Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. And there I was, an aspiring West Coast rapper myself. Here I am, grade 10, Harrow District High School, and I remember it specifically because this was a very important year for me and a decision that a teacher made. I took a media studies class, and we had to do a research project. We had to look up a pop star, an actor, or actress, and essentially make a poster. And I wasn't much of a cut and paste kind of an individual, so I said to her, "Can I make a website?" And she says, "What the heck's a website?" Long story short, she allowed it. And then I had to convince her that Tupac was okay to do research on. So I made this website, I made this project, and when it came time to present it, she said, "Well, you don't have a poster, how are you going to show this thing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to march everybody down to the computer lab." But we didn't have projectors in those days, and we didn't have, an internal network where I could kind of share this web link, so I wrote it down. I wrote it out 25 times for every person in the class. I didn't even bother to photocopy it. And I knew that probably half the class would misspell something because my website was angelfire.com/yada yada yada/Tupac is awesome/thispage.html. And we hit a half dozen 404 page cannot be displayed files that day. But anyway, long story short, I got an A. I passed the class. And that teacher told a few other teachers in the staff room. And the following week, another teacher approached me, and he owned a clothing business. He did silk screening, school uniforms, athletic wear, jerseys, things like that. And he said, "I need a photo gallery. I want to showcase, the clothing options I have to some of the area schools. So let's put this online." So now a school project became a financial opportunity within about 2 weeks' time. And I didn't know anything about HTML. I was just learning it. It was still very new. My dad was learning HTML as a hobby. He was self-employed, and he was a mortgage broker, and so he was making a mortgage calculator app for his website, and I was very interested, so I watched what he was doing, and I kind of picked it up. And anyway, I ended up making this website for this other teacher, and then I ended up making a half dozen websites for his son, a lawyer in Toronto that to this day I've never met. I've spoken with him on the phone, but I've never met him in person. But I've done a half dozen websites for that family. After that, the principal at the time approached me and said, "How do you feel about making the very first ever Harrow District High School website?" And here I am, idolizing Tupac Shakur and trying to grow my hair out like Kurt Cobain. I didn't know where I was going. But I did it. I made this website. And when I graduated high school, I had a web portfolio, a paid web portfolio, alongside my Dickie D ice cream job and everything else I did. And I was thrilled. I went into computer science, and I headed to the University of Windsor. After surviving Y2K, I decided I would enroll in computer science. And what I remember vividly about the computer science program is in the 6 long years I spent obtaining my 4-year degree, I was never really asked to memorize anything in those computer classes. Instead, we solved problems, we collaborated, we thought critically, we had to analyze things. We were allowed to use manuals, we were allowed to use textbooks, look up syntax, things like that. And we were assessed on our ability to think. Everybody in the class was able to write code to solve the problem, but whoever did it in the fewest lines got the A. The most efficient program got the A. So we were challenged and we had to think, but these were real, authentic problems. I want to quote a video. After graduating computer science, I went to the Faculty of Ed, got hired by Chatham-Kent. I haven't looked back. I love every aspect of it. Now, I have grade 8 students who are going to work in jobs that we don't know yet are jobs, solving problems we don't yet know are problems. using technologies that haven't been invented. That's the Did You Know video from a few years ago. So my question is then, where do we stand on rote and repetitive learning? Is it important for a student to know the volume of a cylinder? And I know they're all watching right now going, no! Yes, it is. But is it more important for them to maybe apply the volume of a cylinder to something richer, something bigger, something deeper? I love this slide. I love this slide because I quote Einstein twice and then myself like I'm a big deal, and I'm really not a big deal. But yes, I personally feel that rote and repetitive learning has a place. Students need to know how to spell. Students need to know how to multiply. Students need to know bed mass. Language acquisition would involve some rote and repetitive learning. But I question myself and whether I need to assess my students on that skill. Do I want my students to memorize? Yes. But do I want to assess them on that or something beyond that, that they can use that knowledge and apply to something bigger? Go ahead. Somebody shouted out, and not from the school table. I bet every student at home is yelling right now. 83, thank you. We have a 90-degree angle in the bottom right corner. It's a shared vertex, 30 plus 60 because it's a right angle. And the sum of three angles in a triangle is always 180 degrees. Therefore, x is 83. But how do I know that you didn't guess? How do I know you didn't just pick D without the explanation? See, I think that multiple choice sometimes tells us what students don't know rather than what they do know. You see, if a student gets this question wrong, I can conclude that we need to revisit some math concepts. But if a student gets it right, can I make the same assumption? And it reminds me of a story by a dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine who's here tonight. He has a boat, and he has a cottage, and in order to drive a boat in the province of Ontario, you have to pass a test. And this test involves 50 multiple choice questions, and you have to get a 75% or better. So he buys the book, he studies, he memorizes the book, and he sits down on the computer and he does the test. He actually does fairly well, 90%. And his teenage son says, well, I want to drive the boat. And he says, okay, well, you're going to read the book, and you're going to study, and you're going to do it the right way, and you're going to write the test. He says, no, Dad. No, I just watched you do it. And he gets on the computer, and he opens a web browser, and he opens two tabs. The first tab is the test, and the second tab is Google. And guess what he gets on the test? 100%, and he does it in record time. So what does the test tell us? Well, according to the test, he's better at driving that boat than his dad, and he's barely old enough to drive a vehicle. So maybe the problem is that test. I love using Siri in my classroom. Siri is a phenomenal tool, more than just a calculator, and I encourage my students to use Siri to look up information quickly if we need it on the fly. So I ask her, what is -3 minus -5? And of course, she says 2. But not only does she say 2, she gives me the numerical value in written words. So now I see it in two different ways. But not only does she say it, not only does she show me numerically and the word, she shows it to me on a number line. But not only does she show it to me on a number line, she gives me a graphical representation of -3 minus -5. So when you ask Siri a math question, she gives you the answer in 4 different ways. And I think that's a tool that I want my students to learn how to utilize and learn how to use. This is my, here's another tool. My iPod is my timer. This is my 7th year now of teaching, and like I said, I love everything. Coaching, I love it all. Guess how many tests I've written since I started my career? How many tests do you think I have written in this real world that we prepare students for? Anyone? Shout it out.
0.
The obvious, everybody wants to say 0. Not true. I have written 7 tests because every year we have to do WMIS training. And the WMIS training test is a multiple choice test. And plug your ears if you work for the Chatham-Kent School Board, but myself and some other teachers often cheat on that test. Just kidding. I have not written a test since I started my career in terms of my job, but my job is always evaluated, my job is always assessed. I'm always given feedback. I'm given feedback by students, I'm given feedback by their parents, I've given feedback by colleagues, I'm given feedback by administration. This is an example of a project we did this year, and we were studying simple machines, grade 8 science class. And traditionally, I guess, students would, label simple machines on paper or draw a class 3 lever, something like that. I kind of set them free and said, we're going to build mousetrap cars. Put on my computer science brain where I gave everybody the similar task, and the student who had the vehicle that went the furthest won the contest. So it was sort of a test of efficiency. And I quickly learned from this process that not only did the students understand simple machines, but they understood the relationship between maybe the length of a lever arm and the load of the body of the vehicle. Or they identify relationships between the diameter of an axle and the diameter of a circle, not just wheel and axle, the diameter of the wheel itself versus the diameter of the axle. They understand, they begin to learn about RPMs and what that means and how to reduce friction more than just the simple machines, because it was a performance-based assessment, which is what I think is more relevant to what their real world will look like, whatever that might be. It doesn't just apply to science. This is a worksheet I would have done when I was in school, and that's okay. That's the way it was at the time. And, we'd have to practice and practice and practice. I have students develop apps instead to answer those questions. So there's a few students in my class, and they write lines of code, and they create apps that will find the area or the circumference of a circle provided by user input. So their program will prompt a user for a certain measurement, and it will then crunch the numbers and spit out a measurement, a circumference or an area. And what I learned here is through this process, those students also learned those formulas. Okay, they would have learned the formulas here, but they also learned the formulas here and were more engaged, and then took their app and answered every question in the textbook using the app that they created in class time. And so they learned those formulas, and they learned that the distance around a circle is about 3 times greater than the distance across. They learned that from this process. Back in 2009, I joined Twitter. It was May 26, 2009 to be exact, and I know that because I Googled it. In those days, Twitter was still very new, but I saw it immediately as a great way to collaborate with other teachers, or a window into their classroom to see what they were doing. And I immediately thought, I want this for my students. I really want my students to be able to get on and share outside of the physical walls of the classroom. The problem was student privacy. Students under 13 and not having email addresses and social networking, it was very, very scary in 2009, not that it's not today. So with my students, we developed this web app called TEDxChathamKent, which essentially is like a sandbox or a walled garden where a teacher would make an account and then add students in, and they get a password to access it. So no personal information, just a class code and a password. And when they were on the inside, they would see something very similar to Twitter, but only members of the classroom would see it. And so this is 5 years ago now, and I remember meeting students online after hours, and permission slips, and their parents would follow along and watch too. But during real life events like the Olympics now, we could go on and we would have a conversation after school hours and talk about it on this web app. So it's still up. It's got over 150,000 teachers and students from all over the world still use it every day. I actually received a tweet. Somebody said, "Awesome web app," while I was sitting at the table tonight, so that's pretty neat. After Twidgicate, the next few slides are a few apps that I have developed over the last couple of years with student input, student feedback, and what they wanted to see in it to make our classroom that much more progressive. And I decided that this year I was going to make my classroom as paperless as possible, which I thought, oh yeah, this is easy. We have tablets, we have iPods, we'll figure it out. Math in a paperless classroom is pretty well impossible. So I created Sketchlight as a web whiteboard. It's a whiteboard that runs in the browser, and so students can use a stylus and draw on it like they would on paper, basically a substitution for paper pencil. But it wasn't enough just to draw on a whiteboard app on a tablet, because we're not one-to-one. We don't have tablets for every student. And so Sketchlight is a cloud-based platform. Students would write on this web whiteboard app, and they could share it with other students. They could share it with the teacher. No more, I lost it, no more, I can't find it, none of that. It's saved, it's in the cloud, you can share it at any time. And so now you can assign homework outside of regular school hours. Not that you couldn't before, but you could assign deadlines outside of regular school hours. So if I assign a student work and say it's due at midnight, you'd be amazed at how many of them actually will get it in on time when it's outside of school. ClipQuick is a web app that curates web videos. Students love to put web videos into their presentations. And I love to use videos, TED videos, in my lessons. But I always got frustrated when, searching for a bedmass video from various websites and trying to find the best one. So I created ClipQuick, which is a Google custom search that will search 12 kid-friendly websites on your behalf and give you the results in one spot. So if I went on ClipQuick and I typed in the volume of a cylinder, I would get results from SchoolTube, TeacherTube, YouTube, TED, and all these various sources right here in one spot. It's all about efficiency. Scrawler was an app that we actually developed this year at Indian Creek as a way to sort of reduce printing, to get students writing, or to keep them writing, but in a digital manner on tablets and on phones and things like that. So like the other apps, no personal data, students just log on and can start writing and can share that work with other students and can share that work with the teacher. And they also have the option of determining, there's privilege levels. They can determine if other students can just view or if they can edit their work and leave feedback with the teacher as well. Lastly, Enquiry. Just finished Enquiry. It's an app designed to kind of support our new social studies curriculum, which is a very, very inquiry-based focus. So in Enquiry, a teacher would go on, add students to the network like all the other ones, and you're given tiles based on subject area, so math, language, history, whatever tile you want to create, and then students can go on and find wikis, videos, podcasts, whatever you want, save the URL, and post it under that tile inside Enquiry. So it's still a sandbox, it's still a walled garden, but when teachers and students log on, there's web links to sources that they have curated. So essentially, they're making a more engaging, more authentic version of a textbook that they would have used. They're finding the videos, and they're putting them on here. And I embedded a little bit of a liking system, so you can vote on the links, and the links with the most votes kind of get pushed to the top. Because I know in a classroom of 30, each one of them would want to share 5 or 6 links, and that's 200 links, every single night. And so the highest rated one gets pushed to the top. Excuse me. We used to think, or we used to say that, you go to school to get educated. And I am a co-learner. My students and myself, we are co-learners. They have taught me what it means to farm in Clash of Clans. I had no idea. They taught me about Flappy Bird. They taught me about Minecraft. And I try and teach them about the volume of a cylinder. We're co-learners. It's sort of this flat model, if you will. So I really want to change the mindset of I go to school to do something instead of I go to school to get something. Here's a picture from my class. We are still traditional in the sense that we have desks and we have chairs and we sit in rows sometimes. We also have learning spaces. But one thing I've tried this year is to stop focusing on the bell times so much. Why do bells dictate learning? Why does the bell ring at 10:30? Why does that mean we have to put science away and start math? It's a 24/7 connected world. It shouldn't be like that. So now I've started to let students eat whenever they want. It just started one day when somebody said, I'm hungry, can I have a snack? And I said, yeah, sure, knock yourself out. And what I've realized now, many of them will take a working lunch, which is something we do every single day. They work through lunch. They're utilizing that extra 80 minutes, maybe eating, maybe socializing, but they're also doing other things. Maybe they ate an hour earlier and they're going to keep working on math or something else. So there's a lot of choice in my classroom. And I love this slide in particular because it's like, where's Waldo? And I count 10 devices in that back row. I see 2 on the front desk. I see 3 in the second desk. I see 2 in the next one. And I see 3 at the end. Is that 10? I also see 2 girls collaborating, but I appreciate the girl in the front row using an iPad mini as a calculator while answering a math question on a full-sized iPad. I'm almost done. This picture was taken this year. We were studying cells in science, and I had a few students take pictures under the microscope of prepared slides. And what I thought was so cool about this is these pictures that these kids took are as good as the pictures in the textbook. But what's even cooler than that is many of them would tweet these pictures. But even cooler than that, when they went home and mom said, what'd you do at school? They went like this. And they started to say, we looked at microscopes. Look what I did. I learned about cells today. And I want to quote Jamie Cassup here. He's somebody I saw speak in Niagara Falls. How many of you remember the Commodore 64? Sweet machine. Sweet machine. These iPod Touches, today's tablets, the tools I let my students use in their classroom today, are their Commodore 64s. Today's technology is the worst my students will ever use. And on the concept of a 24/7 connected world, I'll leave you with one final thought. Thank you.